Hello, again, this is BJ Arnett, and this is This Day. We've been having a great, healthy discussion with Barbara Lowe, Dr. Barbara Lowe. Barbara, we were right at that place where you were talking about the woman at the well, and there's so many different things you can think about and align that to today's woman and today's person, male or female, who's gone through some stuff and are basically thinking, nobody knows really what I'm doing, which ain't true. Talk to us about the transparency that that moment must have taken when she heard Jesus reading her mail.
Well, I love this story because she was an outcast among outcasts. She was hiding from her people, from everything. And she was going there during the heat of the day when people don't normally go to the well.
Right.
But I think about, okay, what is my dream for my life? We all have a dream for our lives. And I believe her dream was probably to be loved. I'm just assuming, you know, just go with me for a minute.
That's a good assumption.
Right? So where does Jesus meet her but at the well, the biblical place of love? You think about all the, you know, our forefathers, like Abraham. Okay, so at the well, he meets her, and her dream is to be loved. And Jesus almost immediately brings it up. And he says, you know, tell me who your husband is, because he wants to tap her in to her point of need, which is so interesting because we have Satan's assignment and God's assignment, and they are direct opposite often. Like my assignment from the Lord is to scoop out, to sit in heaps of his goodness and healing and scoop it out on others. But you know, Satan's assignment for me was to sit in heaps of rejection. I mean, I didn't even know how to people, girl. It was so bad. And I people for a living now, right? Okay, so.
I love it. I love it. The exact opposite of what his plan was.
Yes. So her dream was maybe to be loved, but God's dream was so much bigger. And we see that she was transformed and she converts her whole town. So you would think, well, that's a God dream. Girl, we are still talking about her today. Like, we're on camera talking about her.
All the time.
Like, billions of people have heard her story.
Yes.
This is what I'm talking about with legacy. God's dream for you is so much bigger than your dream for you.
Yes.
And all we need to do is follow and be transparent, which means getting into our stuff, owning it, not assuming we have to be perfect, but bringing it to him. I truly believe that God is calling outcasts to be the next big thing. And I love, you know, how outcasted are you? Never too much, because come on in.
You know, there's this thought of that I am too dirty, I am too awful, I am too all of these negative things for God to wrap his loving arms around me, for me to be able to really come out to be who he's called me to be. And that's so opposite of who he is. But when you think about all of the storylines, all of the images that we see that women are supposed to be, we are to look good, smell good, walk good, talk good, all of that, and be in pain. And not bring it up until it's acceptable. And that is not how our loving God really treats us. So with what you are doing, you're unearthing all of those things that are painful, that were negative, and you're not saying they didn't exist, which a lot of people do. You can just push that behind you. You're saying, no, let's unearth that. Let's take a look at that. Let's recognize that it is, and let's receive the love of God.
Yes, and also let's be with it together. Because
not by yourself.
Not by yourself, because you know what, when we are, like I work with so much sexual abuse, right? So that happens, let's say by a dad, and then the child is left alone. The mom is in denial or doesn't know. Okay, the child has no one to work that through with, no one.
And this sisterhood that you've developed,
we can work it through.
We can work it through.
We can be together. Because we know that 1 out of 3 women, and this is in the United States, so this is in Western countries, 1 out of 3 women are raped, molested, or assaulted, right? That's probably a part of why we have twice as much anxiety, twice as much depression, twice as much PTSD as men. That's a lot.
That is a lot
to handle.
And thinking of this thought of legacy that you brought up, you said twice as much.
Twice.
But we are the ones that are raising children. So that twice as much unhealed issue.
We also know that we carry 80% as it is. We know that God is moving in fatherhood a lot right now. We're very grateful for that.
Tremendously.
But women do 80% of the caretaking, the volunteer work in the caring for children. And then at the same time, we make about 50%, you know, between 50, well, less on the dollar, let's put it that way. We have more domestic violence. So we are carrying more of the burden while making less money and trying to prove ourselves more, right? So it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Right, and so, you know, there's this balance of not being, you know, I guess people don't want us to be whiners, but at the same time, we kind of gotta look at it and say, okay, men and women, what are we gonna do? Let's hold hands and solve this together.
And I think that's the key. It's the solving it together and in right order. According to what the Word of God says is that men are totally involved, are to be totally involved, and the lead of raising the children. And basically, the wife is the backup, repeating what the leadership said. The leadership and the leadership, repeating and raising. But the raising is by example through the father. So all of these things, because our definitions and our terms have gotten flipped, we find ourselves in this position of trying to pull back and figure out, how do we get back to right order? And it's not by dismissing leadership and leading with. It's not by dismissing that. It's not by saying all men are terrible or 1 out of 5 men did this. Just stop. It really is about this total harmonious thought of reconciliation, first to the Father and then to one another. And we can do that hand in hand together as women and as men and as families. And I love what you said earlier, because it's one of my key words, as a tribe. We can do this, but we're going to have to be transparent. We're going to have to say, yeah, I did that. Yeah, that happened to me. Yes, it still hurts. The abuse, no matter what form, still exists until we unearth it. So in the process of what you have developed, what are some of the outstanding stories that you've heard that women have said in testimony that, hey, I heard what Nicole C. Mullen said, and I can relate to this, and that gave me the strength to go to my neighbor and say, I see what's going on in you, or for me to take a look at myself. Tell us some of the testimonies.
Oh, there have been so many. Well, we've had some testimonies that have said, thank you so much for including diversity in all your panels, because I feel like I'm heard and I belong. So we have a whole bunch of testimonies along those lines. We have women who have said, I kind of thought I was okay even though I was hurting, and I figured out what was going on with me, and now I know what to do with it.
By the words of your testimony, my goodness, that's so easy.
We have women who are struggling with infertility and what I call the dark side of motherhood, and no one talks about that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, infertility, miscarriages, and so we talked about. We even talked about post-abortion syndrome with one of our panelists, and we talked about infertility, and we talked about I've had a full-term stillborn and what that's like. And one of our folks talked about having real bad postpartum depression and anxiety and how she got through it. You know, you should have heard the argument God and I had a couple years ago where God's like, I want you to self-disclose.
Did you win?
He won.
Yeah.
I want you to self-disclose. No, God, I'm a psychologist. We don't do that. I want you to self-disclose. No, God. Anyway, here I am. And you would not believe the stuff I put out there on my podcast and on social media. God's like, I want you to talk about that. But I even talked about, in my personality type, I can be a boundary crosser. That was so hard for me to admit. And there's this beautiful dialogue between me and someone who's on our team, Dina Jones, and she talked about how I've been healing for her because I've not crossed her boundaries. And she was talking about how she's coming out of doing too much for others, and how I'm coming out of my needs weren't met in childhood, so I can be like, I need, kind of that anxious way. And so we just exemplified this big, messy, God is healing us. We're right in the middle of all this story.
Yeah.
We had people talked about adoption and how their identity is healing through the content.
How can people, you're unearthing some wonderful subjects and understandings, but how can people just go see what you're doing and get involved with it and have the opportunity to begin their healing process, if you will?
Sure.
Begin a dialogue in their neighborhood or in their PTA meeting or in that secret time of women where we are doing our chats over coffee at the coffee shop where we say we'll be right back. How can they get in touch and how can they see some of the things that you've done?
Well, if you go to 3wsummit.com, we do.
I love that, 3W Summit.
3wsummit.com, you can purchase the All Access Pass where you can get all the live sessions plus the 74 talks. And we have some of the biggest speakers in mental health and in, like, I think, popular Christendom thought leaders. So we have some really amazing speakers.
And let's name some names. I already dropped one when I said
Yes.
Nicole C. Mullen, who was one of my favorite artists.
Oh, I love
her.
She's such a great
I just love her.
personality, too. I interrupted her talk several times because I'm like, girl, you did not just say that.
She's so transparent.
Real Talk Chem, which there are like 2 million of us following her. Erin Smalley, Stacey Elridge, Cora Jakes Coleman, Valerie Burton, Allie Worthington, Nicole C. Mullen, Brenda Crouch. We have movie stars. We have
all kinds of women.
Yes. Mia Wright. She's the head of a mega church. We have Brady Boyd. We have a lot of mega church leaders. We have heads of industry. We have movie stars. We have a lot of the top mental health professionals in the world on their subjects in this summit. And we only put it together in 4 months. God just drew everyone to this vision.
That I love it because one, I love God just drew everything and drew everyone to this vision. You're not taking credit for it. That and I love that because what God does is absolutely better than anything that we could put together. We you know, as women, we have our, well, this is me. I'm going to admit this. I have my sticky notes. I must check off my sticky notes. There's something about my sticky notes. When I can ball that puppy up and toss it, I'm good. But when I hear from God, and he says, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it makes no sense whatsoever. And have you ever had God to tell you that you're about to take a mountain that is $3 million? And you go, okay, God, did you see the bank account? There's not $3 million in there. And he says, go on and take that mountain. That's what you're talking about. He said, take that mountain. And then he showed you how to do it.
In fact, my husband and I financed this
Stop.
ourselves. So we were like, are we all in? We are all in.
That's
so
what it takes.
Yeah, so I did all the front end stuff. He did all the technical stuff. And sometimes people would email and say, could you get Dr. Barbara to have her executive assistant to do this? And I'm like, okay, I'll ask Barbara to do that.
Yeah. Turn your hat to executive assistant. You're, look, already as wife, according to Proverbs 31, you have a hat, and it has a whole bunch of things on it that you can do. Just turn the hat. At that moment, you're your own executive assistant.
So funny, so funny. But we worked really hard. We felt like we couldn't have put more into it. And God blessed it. We had women from 106 countries so far. We had 100. We influenced 160-something thousand people.
We've got to get more than 167,000 people. 3wsummit.com.
I'm after my goal. My goal before the Lord is 3 million women's lives changed this year.
Love it. You guys, I don't know what you're waiting for to take action on your own life. There isn't an opportunity that you won't be able to take hold of if you will simply dive into the dream and purpose for which he made you. This is all about you. It isn't about anybody else but you. But guess what? The better you that you are is a gift to somebody else. So once you get yours, you are about to give a massive gift. Just grab hold of it. It's some good times coming. Thank you, Barbara. I really appreciate you. This is good stuff. God bless you.